All right, this video is for any podcaster who's wondered why their show notes don't look right in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, name your podcast player. Often when we're creating an episode, we will upload the audio file, give it a title, and then the next thing we'll do is format some show notes. And these are text, these are headlines, hyperlinks, things that you've referenced in the show, maybe some block quotes, and then you click publish and open it up in a podcast listening app and nothing looks right. And the reason for this is when you click publish on your podcast episode, your show notes get saved as HTML in your podcast's RSS feed. And unfortunately, every podcast listening app renders HTML differently. So I've decided to create a test. I've created a RSS feed with a bunch of HTML formatting elements, bold, headlines, etc. And then I've distributed it to the various podcast listening apps so I can show you why your podcast show notes don't look right in all of the different listening apps. So here's the HTML I tested in the RSS feed. We have a lot of different HTML formatting elements here, various headlines, paragraphs, hyperlinks. We even use different types of line breaks, italic, bold, monospace, itemized lists, block quotes. We even have a nested list. So, you have a number and then tabbed over, you have bullet points. I've also included an HTML table, and I've even embedded an image in the show notes to see if any of the podcast listening apps will display that. All right, so I've just brought up Apple Podcasts, and right next to it, I have the original HTML. And if we scroll to the beginning here, you can see that it starts to break down right away. None of these headline styles have worked in Apple Podcasts. The paragraph tags render pretty well, and the hyperlinks render pretty well. If we continue to scroll down, italic, bold, and monospace formatting does not work in Apple Podcasts. Itemized lists do work, but there was often a spacing issue. So here in my original HTML, there is space between that last bullet and this next line here, but that's not reflected here in Apple Podcasts. It also didn't render that block quote. And with nested lists, it does okay, except it doesn't create a space between the first item and the second item. Also, for some reason, it created quite a big space between the second point and the third point. This horizontal line doesn't render, the HTML table doesn't render, and the example image doesn't render, but the image's alt text tag does render. So you can see it says an exemplary image here. When I hover over the image, that's what renders in Apple Podcasts. So overall, not great support for HTML formatting in Apple Podcasts. The basics are there, paragraphs, hyperlinks, bullet lists, but nothing else really works. All right, next up we have Spotify. Spotify is a very popular podcast listening app. How does it render this HTML? We can see that it is rendering the headlines in a way. It's bolding them and putting them on their own line, but they are not the different sizes. We don't have an H1, H2, H3. They're just all the same size. We see some support for paragraphs, right? So different line breaks. Hyperlinks do work. If we scroll down to italic, bold, and monospace formatting, that does not work in Spotify. Itemized lists do work. Block quotes do not work. And this nested list got all sorts of messed up. Did not render very well inside of Spotify. The HTML table and horizontal line also didn't render, and the embedded image didn't render either. Overall, I'll say I actually like the way that Spotify is rendering HTML a little bit better than Apple Podcasts. There's nice differentiation between paragraphs. There's some nice spacing there. I like that they're at least rendering the headline tags in a way. Hyperlinks look good. Overall, as long as you're keeping your formatting simple, it should look good inside of Spotify. All right, next up we have YouTube Music, which is becoming increasingly important for podcasters. A lot of podcasters want their show on YouTube for discoverability, but you'll see that YouTube is not rendering show notes very well. They're essentially rendering paragraphs with double the space. And so we get all of these gaps here in the show notes, and nothing else really works. The headlines don't render properly. Even hyperlinks are rendered as these text links, which is common for YouTube, but these spaces in the show notes are really disconcerting. And it doesn't have to be this way. This is a decision that YouTube is making here, and this could be cleaned up. I hope they improve this because the source HTML, the source formatting, is the same for all of these apps. So when it doesn't look right in one app, like YouTube Music, but it looks right in another app, we know that it's possible for these apps to display this formatting properly. And in this case, just nothing is really working. Bullet points kind of work, but there's all these big gaps, and nested lists kind of work, but again, big spaces. And then, of course, no images or anything else. So that's YouTube Music. Yeah, lots of room for improvement there. I know the team is really eager to make the RSS to YouTube distribution channel work well for podcasters, and this is one place where they could definitely improve. All right, next up we have Castbox, and this was a nice surprise. Pretty good rendering of the show notes here in Castbox. So they're differentiating between the headlines a little bit. They're putting them on their own line, bolding an H1. I would say that the paragraphs look good. The hyperlinks look good. Italic, bold, and monospace formatting works. Itemized lists with bullet points look great. They format the block quote really nicely. Even a nested list. I think this is the best version of a nested list we've seen so far. Also rendering this horizontal line and the HTML table. And that image is also displaying inline in Castbox. I give pretty high marks to Castbox here. Well done. Next up, we have Pocket Casts, which is the app that I use personally. And Pocket Cast does a pretty good job here. We're getting nice spacing between the paragraphs. There's no differentiation between the headlines. I think hyperlinks look good. Italics, bold, and monospace formatting does work inside of Pocket Casts. The itemized list looks great. Block quote is also formatted properly. The nested list also renders properly. Horizontal line does not work. The table does render, and that embedded image also works inside of Pocket Casts. So another thumbs up here. And I've left the best for last. This is Overcast, which is built by a solo developer, Marco Arment. He is a real podcast nerd, and it shows here in the way that he is displaying show notes. Almost everything works in Overcast. You have headlines that are differentiated, H1s, H2s, H3s, even H4s. They're all different sizes and weights, so well done there. Paragraphs look great. Hyperlinks look great. The italic, bold, and monospace formatting works. The itemized list looks great. I love how he's formatted the block quote here. He's lightened the shade a little bit and tabbed it over to make it apparent that this is a block quote. The nested list works. The formatting's a little wonky. There could be a space after that last bullet point there, but still overall looks good. Horizontal line also works, and the table also renders here. And I also like how he's treating images in show notes. So there is a little bit of a security or privacy concern when loading images. People can track you that way. Technically, an advertiser could use it as a pixel and see that you're looking at the show notes. So he's made it optional. If you want to load the image, you just click this button here and it loads the image in line, which I think is a great way to do it. So if I was going to give top scores to any of the apps, it would be Overcast by Marco Arment. So that's why your podcast's show notes look weird in different apps, depending where you're looking. I would love to see more cooperation here between the different apps. and for them to standardize on one way of rendering show notes. That would make it a lot easier, especially for podcast hosting providers, to give podcasters the tools to make their show notes look great. If you have any other questions about this, you can leave them in the comments below. And if you're a podcaster, you should also subscribe to this channel. We talk about all sorts of topics that relate to podcasting, growing your show, getting more listeners. So if you want to follow along, click subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.